Well, when I was a little boy sitting on my mama's knee.
Hello, my name is Marcie Sclove. Welcome to Going Deeper. This is part 2 of an interview with Mehlaqa Samdani, who is the founder and executive director of Critical Connections. And we're going to, so welcome back.
Thank you so much.
We're sitting here, and that's just kind of
Great
nice
to be here.
Yeah, yeah. So I love having this opportunity to ask you, just if you want to talk a little bit about your faith and about your own experience being a Muslim woman, living here, living in Pakistan, you know, just what has been your experience?
Sure. Well, you know, this is a very personal question in lots of different ways, so I'm not used to talking about it, so just bear with me in terms of...
I'm very grateful that you're willing to talk about
absolutely.
it.
No, yeah. That's no problem at all. It's just that faith has been an integral part of who I am. Mm-hmm. So, you know, being a Muslim has informed my worldview, and has from the very beginning. And I don't know how you get that, mm-hmm. you know, and so we didn't come, my parents were very sort of devout Muslims, but it wasn't, I mean, they weren't very conservative in the way that, you know, a lot of observant Muslims would practice mm-hmm. Islam. And so it was never something that was imposed in our household. Mm-hmm. It wasn't something, but it's still something, the stories that we grew up with, the stories from the Quran, the stories from the Prophet's own life mm-hmm. and his traditions, that's something that a lot of Muslim children grow up with. And so you know, it's really informed my worldview. It's mm-hmm. informed the way I interact with people of different communities, mm-hmm. people of my own faith. It defines the way I see myself as a mother, as a woman, as how I engage with my elders, my parents. Mm-hmm. So everything is really just shaped by my faith. And I feel that, and as a Muslim woman, I feel especially empowered. And wow. Being a Muslim woman, and I think that, and for that I give a lot of credit to my father, who was of a legal background, but you know, he knew a lot about Islamic jurisprudence. Yeah. And so, you know, we were 4 daughters, and I also have a younger brother, but you know, he really raised us sort of steeped in the Islamic jurisprudential tradition. Right.
He was a high judge.
He was a high court judge.
High court judge.
He was a high court judge, but also very scholarly in his own way. And so how I see myself as a Muslim woman, you know, is really sort of defined by how he sort of raised us in terms of our rights as Muslim women. Mm-hmm. So I go about the world, you know, conducting myself in what is supposed to be in the framework that, you know, Islam has provided in terms of my rights as a Muslim woman. In terms of my, you know, just as an example, for instance, you know, I grew up with this notion that as a Muslim woman, I only have financial rights. I have no financial obligations. Okay. So it doesn't matter how much I earn, how much money I make, nobody has right over that money. Oh, I see. It only belongs to me. My children don't have any right over it. My husband doesn't have any right over it. So if we have a mortgage to pay, that's entirely my husband's responsibility. Oh, wow. If I'm feeling particularly generous, I might give of that, but I am in absolutely under no obligation. And so that's something that's very empowering to me. And so, you know, that's something that I grew up with. The other thing is, in terms of marriages, you know, people think a lot about, you know, marriages in the Muslim world, and we hear a lot about honor killings and things like that. Yeah. But again, growing up in the tradition of Islam, you know, one, honor killings is completely antithetical to what it's supposed to be, and we can talk about that later. But just the marriage contract that the husband and wife sign at the time of their marriage is sort of, it's supposed to empower both parties.
Yeah.
And a Muslim woman can write anything in that contract. She can have, you know, she can have her husband sign off on, I will not cook a day in my life. I will not, or I will be paid for looking after your children.
Oh my gosh.
Everything can be written out. You can make all kinds of provisions within that contract. I will need to be paid a sum of money. And that's actually, that's an essential part of the contract in case of a divorce. In case of a divorce, there is an amount of this money or cash or wealth that is automatically transferred.
So divorce is allowed?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And a woman, but within the Islamic tradition, a woman has to take her husband to court. It has to be arbitrated by a judge. It is absolutely allowed, you know, and so it has to be, and the reason it has to be sort of arbitrated by a judge is because if there is a divorce, there is a certain amount of financial compensation that is owed to the woman.
Oh gosh.
Automatically.
Amazing.
And so, and if that, and because, I mean, so she has to, like, you know, prove. But again, grounds for divorce are myriad. I mean, if you know, even sexual gratification, if that is something, even that, a lack of that is grounds for divorce.
Wow.
And so, I mean, anything is grounds for divorce. And if a woman wants out, is absolutely, I mean, if it's mediated by an outside party.
How common is it that women take advantage of these rights or know about and
Well, I think that's really critical, Marcie, because you know, a lot of women in Pakistan, where I grew up, did not know about this, and they don't know about their own rights within an Islamic framework. And just through my own personal experience, I wish there were more fathers like my dad. You know, I wish there were more people who were willing to engage in that kind of research on their own to know that those, and if religion is taught properly, and especially Islam, I feel like, especially in countries like Pakistan, if it's taught properly, you know, women will be even more empowered.
Sure.
But there is such a and cultural norms and patriarchy, it takes over in such debilitating ways that it completely undermines what the tradition says. A lot of my own friends who are highly educated, they're doctors, they're running companies, even they don't know about what their rights within Islam is.
there's a communication problem?
There's a huge communication problem. I think Islam generally has a PR problem, but also this communication problem. And, you know, in terms of inheritance and what, you know, this was something that was being done 1400 years ago.
Wow.
And in many ways, I feel like, you know, sort of growing up with the stories of the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, he was a revolutionary when it came to gender dynamics in you know, 7th century Arabia. Completely revolutionized them. This is a time when young you know, baby girls were being buried alive. At the time of his, you know, prophethood, that is the time when that is how women were treated. They were treated as property. They were buried alive, and he completely turned that on its head. Got a lot of resistance from his own community, where the men were up in arms saying, how can women inherit property? They themselves are property. And yet, when you look around the Muslim world, and it's different in different countries, of course, but you see that a lot of that is lost, you know, in terms of the way tradition is practiced, and I think a lot of it has to do, this sort of stagnation of Islamic jurisprudence. Prudence has a lot to do with colonization.
Oh, interesting.
And the way, you know, sort of colonial powers sort of undermined this very rich tradition. And you know, there were places of learning where these things were developed and talked about and debated. Just, you know, imagine a university, right, where all of these things are happening. But after colonization, in a lot of these countries, money and funding and all of that was taken away. And there was, so that sort of stagnated, and there were these very patriarchal notions of what a woman's place in society is and should be was put in place.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting because I think Western perception is also that women in Islam do not have so much power.
Absolutely.
So it's coming from you know, coming from without. And it sounds like it's also coming from within, that women aren't really educated about their own
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I feel, and there's this anthropologist, Akbar Ahmed, and his theory is that, you know, when colonization happened, Muslim men lost a lot of power, of course, in society. And one way of sort of reasserting that power was within their homes. And that was what led to some of the more, you know, patriarchal notions or manifestations of a woman's role in society. That's when that happened. But the sad thing is that, you know, I feel like there can be more done within the Muslim world in terms of the scholarly tradition to come up with more progressive interpretations and which are more relevant to current times.
Communicating that out more fully. So how does the hijab fit into all of this in terms of how it's worn, how is it used?
Sure. So the hijab is, you know, it has different words, right? So what we mean by the hijab in the contemporary sense is, you know, when women wear the scarf and sort of cover their head and make, and cover their hair and also arms and legs. And this is something, this is a phenomenon. There are verses in the Quran that talk about the hijab, but people have interpreted them very differently in various times. You know, I grew up in Pakistan, and in my college, you know, I went to college, an all-girls college, for my bachelor's there, and there were maybe 3 girls who wore the hijab.
Wow.
Among maybe 800, 1,000 women, only 3. And one of them was our head girl, and she wore the hijab, and she was an American Pakistani. So this is in the early 90s, and she grew up in America and wore the hijab here and had moved back to Pakistan. And she was like one of the most active, dynamic, amazing, very well-spoken people that I knew, but she wore the hijab. So it was not something that was done in generally. And it was a very small minority of women who wore the hijab. I have cousins, you know, so we're 4 daughters who grew up in Pakistan, nobody wears the hijab. We have cousins in Canada who, you know, were born in Canada, raised in Canada. Their mother never wore the hijab. She moved from Pakistan to Canada, never wore the hijab. When her daughters grew up, the second one started wearing the hijab. And then her sister started wearing hijab. And then the mother started wearing the hijab.
And since they're your cousins, do you have a sense of what prompted them to make that change?
Well, I think they went to Sunday school very regularly, and I think they were, you know, sort of influenced by people there who they thought that, you know, that is the right interpretation and that is what they should do as Muslim women, and I absolutely respect and cherish that interpretation for them. And so, and people wear it for such a variety of different reasons. Women wear it, and this is a phenomenon that has become much more prevalent over the past 30 years. And I think it's more, and I don't want to speak for all women, because again, I don't wear the hijab, and you know, for women who do it, but you know, some do it out of a sense of piety because they feel like that is how a Muslim woman should dress. Others do it because of a sense of identity. They want to be known as a Muslim woman, and that's something that I quite envy, because I also want to be known as a Muslim woman. And sometimes when people see me, they won't recognize me as such. So some people do it for that, and some people do it for political reasons, to make a statement that this is who we are. And this is, as you know, this is our way of expressing who we are and our identity, and especially in the current climate. And so people do it out of, you know, for a range of different reasons. And personally, I love all of those reasons. You know, you can wear it.
You don't judge any of them.
Absolutely, and I want everybody to have that space to decide for themselves what kind of, you know, how they want to cover themselves or not cover themselves. That's something. But you know, what's interesting is when I see Western women talk about the hijab as being a tool of oppression and you know, being very oppressive, and it makes me wonder, because I wonder how much it's about them. Because not to say that Western women are oppressed, but all societies regulate what women wear. And all societies regulate what women can do. And they do it in their own. I mean, we don't have women who can walk around naked here in America. But why? This is not an Islamic republic. This is a secular country. Why should anybody tell them how to dress? but they do. I mean, but there are constraints.
Right.
There are social constraints to how people, operate.
And sometimes the ways women dress have the opposite effect. You know, that they're intentionally dressing in a style that has been imposed on them.
Absolutely.
For other purposes.
Absolutely.
For exploitation.
Exactly.
Yeah, not that they themselves, are doing that out of their own sense of, exploiting themselves. They don't understand that piece of it, maybe.
Right. So there are different pressures that we're all subjected to.
Well, it's also, you're reminding me, recently I was having this conversation, the Orthodox Jewish women of this generation, more so I think than their parents or grandparents, are becoming more and more conservative in their dress and in the way they present themselves.
Yes.
And in many cultures, it really is about the women somehow protecting, hiding their hair.
Yes.
Because like for the Orthodox Jewish women, it's about the wigs.
Right, sure.
And in European, Poland, Christian too, not Jewish, but the whole sense of the babushka.
Yes,
the scarf that would be worn.
Nuns.
And nuns,
Catholic nuns.
Absolutely.
But we never have people talking about, why that is. Are nuns oppressed? Are nuns, somehow backward? Or are they sort of, what are they subjecting themselves to? For a lot of women, I feel like it's also very liberating.
Mm-hmm. Right.
To dress exactly how you want to dress. And being conservative for ultra-Orthodox Jewish women, if they feel like their proximity to God is in some ways dependent to them wearing a wig, if that's how they interpret religion, then more power to them.
Exactly.
Who are we to judge whether that... isn't it better to be subservient, especially if you're a believing person, to be subservient to God than to be subservient to men? So it depends on how they're perceiving it.
Right. It's also, there's a way of there being a sense of intimate connection with God.
Right.
That it's not subservient necessarily.
Right, or some kind of connection.
There's some way that I am going to just have this part of myself, my beauty or whatever, just be between me and the divine.
And I think the principle here is agency. Mm-hmm. The principle here is the freedom to choose and choice. And if people, whether they're ultra-Orthodox women or Catholic nuns or Muslim women who choose to cover, if they feel, they should have the right.
Sure.
But when we say, oh, well, in Iran, you have to cover. Well, I can very well say that, yes, in America, you have to cover. It varies in degrees.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to cover.
Sure.
Right? It's our perception of how we view the other, but not our own selves.
Right.
And I sometimes feel that, sort of women's rights organizations here, they're very quick to talk about the burqas in Afghanistan or the chadars in the Northwest Frontier Province or wherever, but, in terms of their own rights, just the fact that women are not given equal pay.
Right.
Is mind-boggling to somebody who's an outsider like myself, who grew up in another culture but came here and knew about, women are completely equal. How does that work? It doesn't quite make sense. Women having to contribute to the household income, to me, that's very oppressive as well. As a Muslim woman, I find that a little bit oppressive. Why should anybody, I grew up with this notion of why should anybody have access to my money? It's mine, and I decide what I want to do with it. So, it's all cultural. There's relativity, there's so much, I feel like we all, and not to say that there's nothing wrong in terms of how some women are treated in the Muslim world. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right. We have to look at things like honor killings. I was looking at the numbers the other day.
Speak about that a little bit.
Yes. So, honor killings, again, just so antithetical to this sort of principle of empowerment and choice when it comes to marriage. It's... in Islam, there's no compulsion in religion and there's no compulsion in marriage. That's another huge thing. And, you might have arranged marriages, you might have, whatever marriages, but there is supposed to be Islamically nobody can tell a woman who to marry.
Wow.
Nobody. And I'll give you a quick anecdote about my sister. I don't know how she'll think about this, but you know, my eldest sister, grew up in Pakistan, was in college, and she was going to have an arranged, somebody sort of, you know, identified somebody here in the US who would be a good match for her. My father came to the US. He was coming here for a conference, so he said, well, why don't I meet that gentleman? And before doing that, he asked my sister, who was studying in another town in Pakistan, she was doing her master's, and he said, you know, why don't you come along and we'll go and meet this guy and see if you like him, because I'm going anyway. And she said, you know, I can't be bothered. I'm in the middle of my semester. You go check him out. If you think he's good, fine, I'll go ahead with it. I think she's crazy. I think she was crazy to do that, but that's what happened. So my dad, you know, kept insisting. She said, no way, I'm not leaving my, you know, school right now. You just go. He went, he met our, my now brother-in-law, and he came all the way to Pakistan to have that wedding. They met 2 days before the actual wedding. But even at that time when they were going for their date to actually meet each other for lunch, my sister knew that if at that point she decides that she does not want to marry him,
she could call it off.
She could call it off. Everybody had been invited, everything had been paid for, but my parents had told her that that is your right.
Wow.
Even at the time of the signing of the contract, if you feel. So that is how it's supposed to be. And how it's done, that's not how it's always done. And so honor killings, just sort of imposing your will on your children in terms of who they should marry, is just...
So what's the killing part? I don't actually know what it...
Oh, so the killing part is like, you know, a woman, and I actually know of people who've, you know, endured that, a woman deciding, well, I don't want to get married to this person who my parents have arranged for me to marry. I'm actually going to run off with somebody else, or go and marry somebody else of my own volition, and then these parents or other family members finding the couple and then killing them both.
Wow.
Either killing
her family members.
Her own family members.
Wow.
Killing their daughter. And so it's just the most atrocious, awful brutality, you know, that you can imagine. Around the world, every year, there are an average of about 5,000 honor killings. Wow. About 5,000 that happen. And just in Pakistan alone, about 1,000. Wow. Which is just mind-blowing. And there are women's rights organizations in Pakistan who do amazing work to raise awareness on these issues and, you know, give refuge to these women and, you know, provide sort of legal services and all of those things. And I was looking at, and so it absolutely has to be, you know, addressed. It's a terrible issue, it's awful, it has to be addressed. But then I was also looking at domestic violence issues here in America and date rape issues here. I mean, every 6 minutes, and you know, a woman is raped. Domestic violence, there are at least 1,000 cases of women dying here in America because of domestic violence.
You are right.
So honor killings, absolutely atrocious. But domestic violence and the number of lives, absolutely atrocious. The number of lives that it takes every year. So again, I feel like we're always very quick
to judge them.
To look, and we should judge that as something absolutely horrendous, but then we should also be able to keep everything in perspective and say, well, yes, we also have our similar issues.
Yeah. Wow.
And so, I mean, I think that, so those are the kinds of things that we try and raise, you know, in our events, like sort of turning the mirror on ourselves.
Getting
and saying,
back to critical connections. Yes.
You know, why do we, is it really about them, or is it really about the way we're looking at them? And what is it about our own selves that we're trying to sort of overlook here? So those are some of the questions that we come up with.
Wonderful. We have just about 4 minutes left, but I wanted to touch on this. I know that some of the events you've been doing are looking outside of the one big topic of Muslim and non-Muslim relationships, but also LGBT and Jewish and other groups that are being targeted, transgender. And I just wanted to ask, because I think that people who are going to watch this might be saying to themselves, I want to have that kind of a conversation with someone. I want to meet and become friends with someone who's so different than me, or who's Muslim and I've heard these terrible things about Muslims or something.
Sure.
So what is some advice, you know, quickly, but what might you offer as a suggestion for those of us who want to cross the divide? And how in the Valley can we move forward in that?
Sure. Well, I mean, again, I felt that, you know, in the wake of the election, there was so much sort of apprehension and, you know, anxiety that people were experiencing. But again, there was so much mobilization in terms of, you know, how can we help and what can we do? And even in terms of attendance at Critical Connections events, you know, before the election, you know, we would have a good turnout, but maybe about 50, 60 people. Yeah. And now we have upwards of 100 people. Sure. You know, there's so much interest. And I feel like there's so many different groups. If I can sort of start thinking about, you know, even there's the Arise for Social Justice, there's the Pioneer Valley Workers Group, there's just so many, there's 413 Staying Connected for Action. I mean, there's so many different political activists that are now out there and sort of advocating and doing a lot of these awareness raising issues, but also groups like, which are not about, you know, sort of politics, which is just sort of about forming those personal connections. Yeah. For instance, we just launched the Western Massachusetts chapter of the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, which is, you know, Muslim and Jewish women coming together and just sort of connecting with one another and talking about issues. And so, you know, those are the kinds of things that people could be doing. We would love for people to come to Critical Connections events because there also you get to meet a wide variety of sort of folks and stuff.
I'd also like to just make a little plug. You have a really great website.
Oh, thank you.
And there's a lot to look at there. There's the blogs and the other articles people have written about events outside of the Valley.
Absolutely.
I would recommend that as another, you know, access into how to plug in.
Yes, well, thank you so much. And absolutely, I mean, please write to us, you know, find us at, you know, criticalconnections.org. Also find us on Facebook. My email is there. I would love to connect. You know, there's so many amazing, people often think that there aren't you know, very many Muslims in the area doing a lot of things, but there's the Islamic Society of Western Massachusetts. They have wonderful interfaith programs that are going on. There are lots of things, you know, so please connect with them. There are other area mosques that I could also connect you with. There's a lovely Hampshire mosque. The president of Hampshire Mosque is a woman, Naz Mohammed.
Good friend of mine.
She does amazing work. And, you know, everybody is really willing. And I would, use this time to also just thank everyone for just the outpouring of love and support and solidarity that we've experienced. You know, since the election, during the election cycle, people have just been amazing. I know that I have a lot of family and friends in Pakistan who are very worried about us being Muslims here in the US. And, you know, I just tell them that we are so blessed to be a part of this amazing community where, yes, there is a lot of anger and there is some hostility, but there's overwhelming support. And for that reason, I also like to tell my fellow Muslims here that, you know, all of these people who've come out in support of us, they don't necessarily, you know, believe in Islam or or agree with all Islamic principles. They're here to support our civil rights and because they, you know, are connected to us as human beings.
Wonderful.
And so in that same vein, it is our obligation as Muslims to speak out against injustice when the targets are LGBTQ members or the Jewish community or the African American community, the immigrant community, whoever it is. Again, as Muslims, you know, we have an obligation by our faith to speak out against tyranny and injustice. And so we need to stand in solidarity with our trans brothers and sisters, our, you know, the LGBTQ community, all of these different vulnerable communities at this time.
Yeah. Wow, you are a wonderful model because that's sort of how you're living, is reaching out to others and being open to connecting even with those who are the ones who might in this moment be hating you, you know,
well, we
but
have
then transforming that into something else.
I have a lot of role models in the larger community. I mean, amazing people like Rabbi Justin David, you know, who sort of got arrested for standing in solidarity with the Muslim community against the Muslim ban, and so many others who've just, you know, are amazing sort of embodiments of social justice.
Right. So there's positive stuff coming out of this difficult time. And I'm so glad to spend this time with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was
Thank
so
you very
enjoyable.
much. I want to thank everyone for viewing this show and showing me and the show your support. And also, please remember that Amherst Media is a wonderful resource that we have here in Amherst, and they need our support as well. My other shows, all of my shows are available at marciesclove.com, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.